You ever wonder why someone pulls away right when it starts to feel real? Why someone who seems connected one moment suddenly becomes emotionally distant the next? Most people take that personally. They assume rejection, detachment, or lack of interest. But here's the truth. When an avoidant creates distance, it's not always because they want to leave. Sometimes it's because they desperately want to stay, but don't know how. Now that might sound contradictory, but human behavior, especially around attachment, isn't linear, it's paradoxical. And avoidants are the walking embodiment of emotional paradox. When they begin to care, they also begin to panic. Emotional closeness for them is like standing too close to a fire. It's warm, but it's also dangerous. And love is the full-blown inferno. It doesn't just touch them, it threatens to burn through the very walls they built to survive. Right? You have to understand something deeper about how the avoidant mind works. Their nervous system is trained, sometimes from childhood, sometimes from trauma, to associate intimacy with risk. Not joy, not pleasure, not home, but risk. Risk of being consumed, risk of being hurt, risk of losing control. So when an avoidant starts falling in love, it doesn't feel safe. It feels overwhelming. And what do most humans do when they feel overwhelmed? They shut down or run. That's exactly what avoidants do. But don't mistake that for apathy. The fact that they're creating distance doesn't mean they don't feel. It means they feel too much. It means the bond is real enough to scare them. Because when there's no emotional investment, they don't need to run. They only run when the stakes are high, when you matter, when the connection has the power to destabilize them emotionally. Most people miss this. They think if he loved me, he'd come closer. But with avoidance, love looks like withdrawal. It looks like confusion. It looks like a push-pull dynamic that drives you crazy. But in reality, it's them trying to manage something bigger than they know how to handle: connection, vulnerability. And here's what makes it even more complicated. They may not even understand this themselves. Most avoidants don't have the emotional language to articulate their experience. They just feel a surge of discomfort, and the default response is get space. So they create distance, not to abandon you, but to protect themselves. And sometimes to protect you from their chaos, to feel safe enough inside themselves to even contemplate coming closer again. You see, for an avoidant, love isn't a relaxing experience. It's a war between the longing to connect and the fear of losing themselves. It's a daily conflict between I want you and you're too close. And when they pull away, they're trying to find enough oxygen to keep breathing in a situation that feels emotionally suffocating, even if you're not doing anything wrong. This is where a lot of relationships break down, because if you don't understand the psychology of the avoidant, you'll personalize their retreat. You'll chase, you'll protest, you'll try to force connection. But here's the harsh truth. The more you pursue, the more they retreat. Because now it's not just emotional closeness, it's pressure. And avoidants equate pressure with threat. So what do? You stop interpreting their distance as rejection, and you start understanding it as their version of emotional regulation. You stop pushing for answers and start giving them space with boundaries. You don't abandon yourself to hold space for them, but you allow them room to process. Because that's the only way they ever feel safe enough to reconnect from choice, not obligation. And when an avoidant chooses to come back on their own terms, after reflection, after space, that's when you know there's real love brewing underneath all the silence. Because that return is not casual. It's not convenient. It's intentional. It's them stepping back into the fire, not because it's comfortable, but because they're realizing the warmth is worth the risk. So remember this, an avoidance distance isn't always about departure. Sometimes it's the preparation to stay. They just need to retreat, not because they don't care, but because they finally do. And that kind of fear only shows up when love is real. Let that sink in. Because once you stop chasing their closeness and start understanding their fear, the game changes. And so does the power you hold in that dynamic. You think they're gone. You assume silence means indifference. But what you don't see, what they'll never tell you, is that the avoidant is still watching you. Quietly, obsessively, not with words, not with confession, but with attention. And attention is their secret currency of love. You have to understand something most people never grasp. Avoidants don't process love out loud. They don't journal about their feelings or pour their heart out in texts. They don't chase, they observe from a distance, behind emotional walls. They aren't absent, they're hidden in plain sight. They're lurking behind your stories, reading your captions twice, trying to decipher one thing, am I safe to come closer? Trying to decipher one thing, am I safe to come closer? You see, when an avoidant loves you, they can't afford to be impulsive. Vulnerability is a gamble they've trained their nervous system to avoid. They don't run toward emotion like the securely attached do. They pause. They calculate. They watch. Because emotional safety is a precondition for their return, and watching you silently is their twisted way of staying connected without risking exposure. They'll never admit this. In fact, if you ask them, they might downplay it or deflect entirely. But make no mistake, their silence isn't absence, it's surveillance. Their distance isn't disinterest, it's self-protection. Because the more they care, the more hyper-aware they become of every possible sign that you might reject, humiliate, or abandon them. And yet, they can't look away. Because now they've attached. And that attachment is consuming them from the inside out. This is where most people go wrong. You interpret the silence as a closed door. But to an avoidant, silence is the door. That's the only way they know how to feel close without feeling threatened. They study you in the shadows. They monitor your energy from afar. It's not romantic, it's not cinematic, but for them, it's intimate. Because intimacy for the avoidant doesn't happen face to face, it happens in the safety of distance. And here's the paradox. The more they love you, the more they retreat into this silent watching mode. Love doesn't make them louder, it makes them quieter. And that's what makes it so confusing, because every fiber in your being is wired to believe love looks like presence, communication, touch, connection. But for them, love looks like hesitation, withdrawal, stillness. They love you, but through a lens of fear, and fear tells them to hide. So what does this mean for you? It means if they're watching, they're not done. It means if they're monitoring your digital footprints, they're still emotionally tethered. It means that even though you haven't heard from them, they're listening. They're waiting. They're hoping for some kind of sign that it's safe to reach back out. And that when they do, you won't shame them for the silence that protected them. You've got to realize this is not about you doing more. This is not about performing for their attention. This is about understanding the language they speak. And the language of the avoidant is nonverbal. It's subconscious. It's protective. But underneath that, if they care, if they're checking in, if they're watching, they're still connected. And connection with someone with an avoidant attachment style is not easy to shake. That doesn't mean you chase them. That doesn't mean you wait around endlessly, giving your power away. But it does mean you stop believing the lie that silence always equals closure. Sometimes silence is their way of staying loyal to the idea of you, even when their trauma won't let them near you. So the next time you're tempted to say, he must not care, pause. Because the avoidant who's watching you in silence might care more than you'll ever know. But caring and coping don't always speak the same language. He's not showing love how you want. He's showing it the only way he can. And when someone is watching you silently, obsessively, despite their fear, despite the discomfort, you better believe something deep is brewing beneath the surface. Because people don't stare at what they're done with. They don't analyze what they've erased. And they don't hover in silence over something they've emotionally detached from. They do that when they're still all in, just too afraid to show it. So ask yourself, are you interpreting silence through your wounds? Or are you decoding it through understanding? Because once you realize that the avoidant silence isn't a void but a window, you stop reacting with fear and start responding with power. Love, for most people, is loud, it's expressive, it's full of gestures, affection, declarations. But for someone with an avoidant attachment style, love doesn't show up in grand words. It slips in through controlled, careful actions. And often, those actions are so subtle, so structured, that they go completely unnoticed until you look closer. An avoidant doesn't open the floodgates, they open a window. 1 inch at a time. And they do it on their terms, not because they want power over you, but because this is how they manage the chaos inside. See, when an avoidant loves you, they can't hand over their heart all at once. It's too risky. What they can do is offer you access in moments, in fragments, in ways that feel safe to them. And if you're not paying attention, you'll miss that what looks like distance is actually their version of closeness. They might not tell you how they feel, but they'll drive across town to help you. They might not say, I love you, but they'll make sure you're safe, protected, comfortable. You'll catch them doing things for you they wouldn't do for anyone else. Lending their time, making room in their schedule, showing up when it counts. That's not casual. That's not random. That's intimacy. Avoidance style, the mistake most people make is judging their effort by how fast or how much they give. But with avoidance, the volume doesn't matter. The intent does. If they're giving you their time, their energy, their presence, even if it's limited, that means you've breached their walls. Even if you're only getting 20% of them, if that 20% is consistent, deliberate, and real, that's more than they offer anyone else. Because for them, offering time is offering self, and that's sacred territory. Here's what you need to realize. Avoidants value autonomy over almost anything. Their time, their space, their freedom. That's their oxygen. So if they begin to voluntarily share any of it with you, even in small doses, that's massive. That means they trust you enough to risk discomfort. It means they're slowly letting go of the fear that closeness will trap them or expose them. They're leaning in. But they're doing it on their terms because they don't yet feel safe surrendering control. And control for an avoidant is not about dominance, it's about survival. Love has betrayed them before. Vulnerability has cost them something in the past. So now they pace themselves. They set the rules of engagement, not to manipulate you, but to keep themselves from drowning in emotions they can't yet process. So when they say, let's hang out, but only for a little, or I'm not ready to talk about that yet, they're not shutting you out. They're trying to stay regulated, because for them, intimacy is a nervous system overload. It's not about how often they show up. It's about how meaningful it is when they do. And if you're wise enough to notice those moments, you'll realize they're building a bridge to you. Slowly, quietly, carefully, not with fireworks, but with presence. On their terms, yes, but make no mistake. On their terms doesn't mean fake. It means fragile. It means this is all I can handle right now. But I'm still here. And if you don't understand this dynamic, you'll misread everything. You'll think he's not making enough effort, or she's keeping me at arm's length. And maybe that's true, but ask yourself, how close does this person let anyone get? If you're getting more than most, that means something. That's not just affection, that's evolution, that's growth. That's love on the edge of fear. The truth is, avoidants test the water before they swim. If they offer you pieces of their time, if they let you into small corners of their life, they're watching to see how you handle it. Do you push? Do you rush them? Or do you meet them where they are? Because when you respect their pace, you make it safer for them to give more. So if you're wondering whether they love you, don't just listen for the words. Watch what they offer and how deliberately they offer it. If they're trying, even in imperfect ways, even inconsistently, that's not confusion. That's courage. That's love. Trying to breathe through a wall of fear. Never forget, when an avoidant gives you their time, they're not just showing up. They're letting you in. And for them, that's not a casual act. That's a declaration. And let me tell you something most people never realize. When an avoidant starts letting you see behind the mask, it's not an accident. It's not a slip. It's a breakthrough. Because for them, vulnerability is not a comfort zone. It's enemy territory. Their entire identity is built around control, self-sufficiency, and emotional armor. So when they start cracking that shell, even just a little, pay attention. That's not weakness, that's love in motion. See, avoidants grow up with a belief system that says no one is going to catch me if I fall. Whether that message came from emotional neglect, inconsistent parenting, or past relationships that betrayed their trust, the end result is always the same. They internalize the idea that showing emotion is dangerous, that opening up is giving someone the very weapon that can destroy them. So they build their life around strength, not real strength, controlled strength. Composure, stoicism, detachment. But here's the twist. Love doesn't respect that armor. When an avoidant starts to care deeply, something in them begins to malfunction. The old programs don't work anymore. The walls that kept them safe now feel suffocating. And the person they're trying so hard to keep out, you start slipping into their emotional system quietly, unexpectedly, powerfully. Now here's where it gets interesting. They won't just walk up to you and say, hey, I'm falling apart emotionally because I love you. No. They'll test the waters in tiny fragmented ways. They'll reveal cracks in their facade, not because they're weak, but because their system is reorganizing itself to include you. They might tell you about a moment of fear, a past hurt, something they've never shared with anyone. When they do, that is not just a story, that is a confession, that is emotional access. You've got to understand, when someone who's spent their life in control starts showing you their humanity, it's not a performance. It's an emotional earthquake. They're not trying to impress you. They're trying to trust you. And trust for an avoidance is like learning a new language. Every sentence comes with doubt. Every word feels exposed. Every moment of truth is a battle between, I want to let you in and I need to protect myself. So what does this look like in real life? It might be a casual mention of a parent who wasn't really there, or a passing comment about a heartbreak they never got over. It might be a moment where they say, I'm not okay today, when their usual answer is always, I'm fine. These aren't just words. These are emotional landmines they've chosen to place at your feet, because somewhere deep inside, they believe you might be safe enough to disarm them. And this is where you have power, the kind of power most people don't even realize they have. Because how you respond in these moments will either affirm their risk or reinforce their fear. If you meet their vulnerability with judgment, impatience, or pressure, they'll retreat deeper into the shell. But if you meet it with presence, with calm, with respect for how hard that moment was for them, you become the exception to their rule. Think about that. Most avoidants have a rule book that says people are dangerous, emotional exposure is a liability, but when they start to feel emotionally pulled toward you and they begin testing the safety of that bond by letting down their guard, and you respond with grace rather than pressure, that rewrites the rule. It creates a new association in their mind. Maybe not everyone will abandon me when I open up. This is how you know they love you. Not when they say the words, not when they buy you flowers, but when they show you what they never show anyone. Their mess, their fear, their cracks. Because for them, love isn't about showing their best. It's about risking you seeing their worst and praying you don't walk away. And that is sacred. So if you're ever unsure whether the avoidant in your life truly cares, don't just look at how they treat you when everything's perfect. Look at what they let you see when things are not. If they start dropping their armor, even momentarily, that's not insecurity. And when an avoidant transforms in front of you, it means they're not just trying to survive anymore. It means they're trying to connect. Not with the world, with you. Never underestimate the love it takes for someone who's been trained to hide, to finally be seen. Avoidants don't chase. That's what you've been told. That's what you believe. And in many cases, it's true. They don't pursue the way most people do. They don't reach out impulsively or confess their love in grand gestures. But what if I told you that pulling away is often their twisted way of holding on? That distance, for them, is not rejection, it's regulation. And what's even more shocking, the more they love you, the more they'll test that distance, just to see if you'll still be there when they return. See, here's the paradox. Most people interpret space as disinterest. We've been conditioned to think that love looks like proximity, consistency, intensity. But to an avoidant, space is survival. They use distance to process what they're feeling because what they're feeling is so intense, so overwhelming that it threatens the fragile equilibrium they've spent their whole life maintaining. Love destabilizes, not because it's wrong, but because it's real. And real connection activates all the wounds they've buried under the surface. So when they pull away, it's not necessarily because they've lost interest. Often it's because they become too emotionally activated. They start to feel out of control. And for someone who's lived in a state of emotional independence, that lack of control is terrifying. Love brings them face to face with the truth they've avoided their whole life. I need someone. And that need triggers shame, vulnerability, and fear all at once. So what do? They retreat, they disappear, they fall back into themselves, not because you did something wrong, but because they can't yet handle how right you feel. But here's what most people miss. Even when they're silent, they're still connected. Even when they walk away, they don't fully let go. That mental tether doesn't snap, it stretches. They stay emotionally tied to you, just in a safer zone, one they can control. And here's where it gets wild. The more time they spend in that space, the more they start to realize something they weren't prepared for. They miss you. Not because you're gone, but because your absence doesn't equal peace. It creates chaos, emotional chaos. Their old strategies don't work anymore. Avoidance no longer brings relief. It brings longing. It brings you to the forefront of their mind, not as an escape, but as a need they can't shake. They think, maybe I was better with her. Maybe I felt more grounded around him. Maybe that space I thought I needed is actually the thing making me unravel. And now suddenly they're in a dilemma because they built their whole personality on not needing anyone, and now they realize they can't stop thinking about you. So what do? They might send a message, a subtle one, a just checking in text, meme, a memory, a breadcrumb. And most people miss it, or worse, resent it. But that breadcrumb, that's an invitation. That's an avoidant saying, I'm still here, but I'm scared. Show me it's safe. Because here's what they're testing when they pull away. Your reaction. Do you chase? Do you collapse? Do you rage, beg, or guilt trip? If you do, they retreat further. But if you stay centered, self-respecting, emotionally available without being emotionally dependent, they feel safe. And that safety is what invites them back into closeness. This is how you know they love you. Not when they stay close with ease, but when they create distance, then choose to return. That return is not casual, it's calculated. It's a sign that despite the discomfort of vulnerability, despite the war going on inside their nervous system, they still choose connection. And for someone who fears being engulfed, choosing to come back is not just emotional, it's revolutionary. So no, avoidants may not chase like others do, but they circle back when it matters. They revisit, they reflect, they re-engage in small, careful ways. Not because they're unsure, but because they're terrified of getting it wrong. And if you can recognize that their distance isn't always dismissal, you'll stop taking their silence so personally and start seeing it for what it really is. A sign they care more than they're capable of expressing. Because here's the truth. People don't come back to things that mean nothing. They come back to what their soul is still fighting for, even if their ego can't admit it yet. So if an avoidant pulls away and returns, understand this. That return is their version of, I love you. And it may not sound like much, but from someone who spent their life running from connection, it's everything. Here's a truth that'll shake everything you thought you knew about love. When an avoidant starts to open up about their past, when they show you the shadows they've never revealed, it's not just them reminiscing. It's not just storytelling. It's a signal, a deep unconscious transmission that says, I trust you enough to let you see the reason I built all these walls in the first place. And that moment is sacred. Most people think vulnerability is about crying on someone's shoulder or sharing your insecurities openly. But for an avoidant, vulnerability isn't allowed. It's strategic. It's rationed. It only comes out when their nervous system detects safety. When their subconscious says, maybe this person won't weaponize my truth. That moment when they let you in, not just to their current world, but into the experiences that shape them, that's not weakness. That's love revealing itself through the language of pain. See, avoidants are not just emotionally distant for fun. There's a blueprint behind it. Many of them have childhoods filled with emotional neglect, or they were conditioned to believe that their feelings were burdensome or inconvenient. Some were praised for their independence and punished, directly or indirectly, for needing too much. So they learned early. Emotions are dangerous, attachment is unreliable, and safety comes from self-sufficiency. But love challenges that entire system. Love whispers, you don't have to carry this alone anymore. And when that whisper gets loud enough, when your consistency, your calm, your presence override the chaos inside them, they start to talk. Slowly, cautiously, but they talk. They reveal that their father never really saw them, that their mother only praised achievement, that their first heartbreak felt like a betrayal they never healed from. And the moment they speak that pain aloud, they are handing you a loaded weapon. Because for them, history is sacred. It's protected. It's the foundation upon which their emotional fortress was built. And if they're showing you that foundation, if they're letting you walk through the ruins of their past, it's because they're considering building something new with you. Something that doesn't require hiding. But here's the catch. They won't say that outright. They won't sit you down and announce, "This means I love you." That's not how they operate. Instead, you'll hear it in the way their voice softens when they talk about a memory they've never told anyone. You'll see it in the way they look away when the emotion starts to rise and they're terrified. You'll see their wound. That right there, that's not just transparency. That's trust. That's their heart, stripped of armor, exposed in front of you. And what you do in that moment will shape everything. You see, an avoidance brain is wired to expect abandonment, judgment, or emotional punishment. If you flinch, if you dismiss their story, minimize it, or use it against them later, they'll close up so fast you won't even recognize the person you were just holding. But if you hold the space, if you listen, if you breathe with them, if you simply say, "I see you," something in them rewires, something ancient, something they buried. Now they're not just opening up because it feels good, they're opening up because you feel safe. And when an avoidant finally feels safe, love becomes less of a threat and more of a possibility. They begin to recalibrate. They start to understand that they don't have to face